about, we just have about 15 minutes of our Move and Learn series. This is the 5th of 6th in our Move and Learn series. And today we're talking about hips and hammies. All right. So we're going to do a little bit of learning and a little bit of movement. Make sure that you have some space. We will be getting down on the floor. We will be standing. So if you don't have what you need as far as space, I do have a couple of props right now. You can certainly try some of these things later when you're able to access those props. All right. So the first part is your hips. Right? Your hips are responsible for a lot of movement, right? They do both flexion and extension of your legs. So forward and backward of your whole leg. And if you can imagine, a lot of times during the days, we're working all day and we're sitting. So we're keeping those hips in flexion and we're sort of tightening those hip flexors and bringing them down to this type of movement pattern instead of having good posture and whole range of motion. So the other movement that your hips are responsible for are abduction, abduction, and adduction, adduction. So abduction is out and adduction is from this position in, all right? And then the final way that your hips move is a rotation, all right? So that would be where you're bringing your toes left, right, moving that whole joint, all right? So I have 3 exercises that we can do to help strengthen our hips. Of course, making sure that you get up and stand fully throughout the day will help ease that flexion in your hips. And then I have 3 moves that you can do to improve your mobility for your hips. So the first one is clamshells. Maybe some of you have heard of these. Maybe you've had to do them before. If you have a band, it's not required. You can place that just above your knees. You're going to lie on your side with your knees together and your ankles together, and you're going to open up. Bring that knee up toward the ceiling and squeeze at the top. So you should feel a nice contraction right here in your hip with the clamshell. Again, you don't have to use a band. All right. So you can do these on both sides. We want to make sure we strengthen both sides. All right, the second exercise is actually called a glute bridge, but it definitely works the hamstrings. You can continue to use the band for this or leave a band off. You're going to press your heels down into the ground, drive your hips up, 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 and squeeze. You see, I'm counteracting the flexion. I'm extending, I'm pressing the hips up toward the ceiling, and relax. And then the final exercise that is good for your hips, you're going to get down into a tabletop position. So those knees are under your hips, your wrists are under your shoulders. These are called fire hydrants. And you'll recognize why very soon. You're going to lift that knee right up. Lift that knee. Lift that knee. Again, you should feel that contraction right there in the side of your hip. And you want to do the same number on both sides. And then I have 3 mobility or stretch for your hips. The first one is still in that tabletop position. You're going to pretend like you have a marker or a pencil. Your knee is at the tip of your knee. You're going to start that tabletop position, and you're going to make 10 tiny circles. Lift that knee just slightly off the ground. 10 tiny circles in one direction. and then 10 tiny circles in the opposite direction. So this is working on that rotation, right? Then you're going to do 10 big circles, as big as you can, using that knee as your pencil in one direction. What this does is this helps to distribute the synovial fluid, which is like WD-40 for those joints, and get them nice and loose. So 10 big circles in one direction, and then 10 big circles in the opposite direction. And you'll do that on both sides. All right. The second hip mobility is a lunge, which is a nice stretch for those hip flexors. So you're going to take a big step forward, drop all the way down. I'm going to do the other side so you can see what's happening to my hip. Right here, it's opening up. Tuck that toe under, reach for the sky, and push forward. You should feel this all through that hip, a nice stretch. Stretch should always feel good. It shouldn't feel sharp or painful. You want to hold the stretch for between 30 and 60 seconds. And then, of course, you want to do the same thing on the other side. And then the last hip mobility is called 90 and 90. So you're going to have your knees at 90 degrees. Put your hands behind you just to support you. Nice, tall, straight spine. You're going to bring those knees to one side. You're getting both internal and external rotation at the same time. Back to the middle, other side. I like to do 5 on each side. It doesn't matter if your knees don't touch the ground, just bring them as low as you can without lifting your glute off of the floor. You should feel a good stretch. All right, any questions about the exercises or the mobility for the hips before we go on to those hammies? Everybody stand up and feel those hips get really loose after you did those hip circles? Yes? Good, good, good. All right. Our hamstrings, they actually work together with the hips to do a lot of movement for you. I have a broomstick here. It's just a simple broomstick. I took the broom off the bottom. All right. The hamstrings are actually 3 muscles that go from the top of your thigh all the way down to behind your knee in the back of your leg. And they help you to do walking, squatting, bending, moving your pelvis. Those hamstrings get involved in that. All right. Most of the injuries that you see in sports are because hamstring injuries. So we definitely want to make sure that we keep them nice and strong as well as nice and flexible. All right. So I have 3 exercises for hamstrings. You do not have to have a broomstick to do this, but I want to demonstrate and show you the right way to hinge at your hips, which will activate your hamstrings. So I'm going to have nice straight spine. The broomstick is touching right at my sacrum, the bottom of my spine, right in the middle of my T-spine, my thoracic spine between my shoulders, and the back of my head. And what you want to do is you want to press your hips back, 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 maintaining all 3 points of contact. A lot of times you'll see people do this. They round their upper back and they lose that point of contact down here. Or maybe they press their head forward and they lose that point of contact here. All right, so this is a good way to practice the movement and make sure that you're doing a hip hinge properly, is to have a stick long enough that it'll touch all 3 points And you can press through the motion and back up. So the exercises then, again, you can use your broomstick or nothing at all. It's a good morning. So you're just going to be here in that position to press those hips back and rise on up. You should feel this in your hamstrings. And then the next exercise is a deadlift. There are a wide variety of deadlift options. All right, so we're going to start with a nice, simple, two-legged deadlift. You can use dumbbells or not. And it's the same motion. So you're going to press those hips back. You're going to keep your dumbbells nice and close to your body. Slide them down and then come straight up. You can progress this with heavier weights, or you can work to do a single leg deadlift where you just use one leg down. Lots of options there. And then the final exercise that really targets those hamstrings is another variation of the glute bridge with the hamstring walkout. So you'll get in that glute bridge position and you'll slowly walk your feet out and back in. And this will really load those hamstrings. You'll feel this. Out and back. And of course, we want to keep them not only strong, but flexible. So I have 3 stretches for your hamstrings. The first one, I just call it an active lying hamstring stretch. One foot is straight out flat. The other knee is bent about 90 degrees. You can hold on behind your knee if you like. Your toes are flexed, and you're just going to bring that knee up as straight as you can. You should feel a nice stretch all along the back of your leg. We'll just do 10 on each side. Slow and controlled, don't rush it. Each one should get a little bit longer. And make sure that your shoulders stay on the floor of the mat. If you want, you can take a rope or a towel and put it across your foot to help guide you. You can hold here, but you don't need it. The second hamstring stretch is also lying down. You're going to extend your arms straight out like a T. You're going to lift that foot and bring it all the way over to the side. Now this one, you should also feel a little bit of a stretch in that hip as well. If you can't quite touch your foot to the ground, that's okay. Go as low as you can. You're going to keep both shoulders on the ground. We'll do 10 on each side. Make sure you have enough room on both sides. Yeah, that side. You'll probably recognize one side's going to be a little tighter than the other. Now you can advance this stretch if you wish. And what you would do here is you would bring both feet up and over together and back. So that takes a little bit more control and strength to do both feet than 1 foot at a time. So certainly start with 1 foot at a time. Let's see where everybody is, because we have one more hamstring stretch. Everybody with me? All right. The last one is another active hamstring stretch that you can do standing. You can do this maybe while you're out for a walk. You can do a couple of these interspersed in your walk. You can do them standing still or moving. So you're going to put the heel down, toes up, take your fingertips and scoop, brush the ground with your fingertips and rise all the way up. So standing still, it would look like this. All right, you want to do 5 or 10 on each side. If you were out walking, you might take 3 steps. And that third step, you stop here, give a little scoop. 1, 2, 3. Now you're on the opposite foot. Give a little scoop and continue on. So either way, it's a great way to get those hamstrings a little mobile and move. If your fingertips don't quite touch the ground, that's okay. Come down as low as you can. Scoop, lift all the way up. Good. Yep, yep, yep. Make sure that those toes are flexed. When toes are flexed, they're pointing back toward your nose. Your knees aren't locked out. Come down, scoop, and reach. Great. Good. So that is all that I have. Does anybody have any questions? Comments, feedback? Want anything more? Anybody learn anything? Feel free to unmute.
I like the broom.
The broomstick?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great way to make sure that your spine is straight and that you're using the right movement pattern for a deadlift, because so many people don't deadlift properly. You could end up hurting yourself.
Yeah, I used the Swiffer broom in the kitchen and I did it.
Oh,
I was like,
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so helpful. I used my shelf in my closet fell down and broke off the wall, but now I have this. So that's what I use.
Perfect. Yeah, the closet rod. Well, I mean, once you get it, once you have the movement down and you realize that you're not losing contact with any of those 3 points, right? Very rarely do people lose contact with the midpoint, but occasionally. Typically, it's the tailbone.
Yeah.
And maybe the head.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I had never done that before with the broom. Sometimes cueing, I'll say, imagine your body's like a chopstick. And the hard, like the nice chopsticks, you can't break them, right?
Right.
But I've never used like a physical or had some sort of kinesthetic type of cue, you know?
Yes, a lot of people appreciate feeling that, touching them in all 3 points, and can realize when it's not touching them.
Right, because sometimes verbal and visual doesn't do it. But
yep, kinetic, yes.
Feeling, right? That type of like using a block. Sometimes for squats, when I'm reaching to the floor, I go to hit the block, and I know each time I've got to touch the block, you know, something like that, and that does work for some people. And that broom thing was great. Those 3 points.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Good. Yeah, David said these are great moves. So hopefully you'll incorporate some of these into your daily routine. Get those hips and hammies strong and flexible, because we definitely want our muscles to be flexible, but we also want them to be strong. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks,
I was gonna say, I noticed my head when I did the broom, my head wasn't touching the first time. I was like, well, that's because you sit at a desk and, you know.
Right, and we text. So we're all here, right? We're on
Yep.
the computer, we're texting. So another thing, I like the cue of pretending like you have something disgusting on your hand and it's coming at you. And you try to pull back to get to avoid it, right?
Yeah.
Like a chin tuck.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to give themselves a double chin, but you know. Yeah.
Speaking of hamstrings, totally random. I mean, it is about hamstrings, but yesterday I went to the doctor with Nick and we got to see like an ultrasound. Her